This week on Personally Speaking, I have a personal hero as my guest. His name is Joseph A. Falgiano Jr., a member of the NYPD for many, many years, a detective when he retired. We're going to talk to Joe about life and death, and we're going to hear from him in ways that are profound and moving. Stay with us on Personally Speaking. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr. Jim Lisante, and Joe Falgiano joins me now. Joe has been a parishioner at my church, Our Lady of Lourdes in Massapequa Park, New York, for years. 2.5 years ago, Joe was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he went from there in operations to hospice. When Joe was in hospice, he asked me if he might be a guest on Personally Speaking. He wanted to talk about his family and the things he loved, about his life in law enforcement, but especially to talk about his journey home to the God he truly adores. Joe Falgiano grew up in Flushing, Queens, New York, the only child of Mary and Joseph Falgiano. He went to Catholic elementary school and then Malloy High School in Queens and attended St. John's College. In 1984, Joe entered the NYPD Police Academy. In 1993, Joe was promoted to detective, and in 2005, he retired from the NYPD to join the DEA task force. Joe then began to work with the Queens County District Attorney's Office as a detective investigator with Homeland Security at John F. Kennedy International Airport. In 2012, Joe was promoted to detective sergeant, and in 2023, he was promoted to QDA Detective Lieutenant assigned to QDA investigations. Joe has been married for many years to Pam, and together they parent 6 incredibly great grown children, 3 boys and 3 girls, part of a blended family, and they are also grandparents of 6. Joe has been with me for many years as a friend, and he wanted to talk about his life, about his faith, and about all that sustains him. Not too long after this interview, Joe went home to the God he loved, and I'm delighted to present to you the testimony, the witness of a great believer and a great man and a public servant. On Personally Speaking, here is Joe Falgiano. Welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Monsignor Jim Lisante. As I mentioned in the introduction, my guest today is Joseph Falgiano. I mentioned to you before that Joe worked 20 years in the New York City Police Department, and then an additional 20 years working in the Queens County District Attorney's Office as a detective. And in 2001, Joe was one of those wonderful people who went down to the site of the 9/11 attack and spent considerable time trying to help locate people and finally their remains. As a result of that experience, Joe found out just 2.5 years ago that he was afflicted with pancreatic cancer. And we've been on the journey together since then. So we're going to talk about that today. Joe, thanks, first of all, for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And Joe, let me ask you this. Everybody knows they're going to die, and everybody knows that finding out you're going to die by whatever form is pretty frightening. The C word, cancer, is something people never want to hear. I mention that because when you got the first word that you were carrying some serious illness, do you remember what your response was? How did you feel, and what did it make you decide to do?
Well, when I first found out, I was devastated. Nobody would ever think in their right mind that they would have cancer, especially pancreatic cancer. And I dealt with it with some of my in-laws, and they did not last more than 2 years.
Right.
So for me, it was devastating. I was heartbroken. All I thought about was my family. In 2020, I was diagnosed in June of 22, but my father passed away in February of 22. My mom had Alzheimer's, dementia, had to deal with AIDS with her, and being there for my mother. And then after being diagnosed and being in the hospital for 5 days, I found out that my mother her dementia wasn't as bad because she knew I wasn't around. and that upset her. And then I finally had to deal with the loss of my mom in October after going through 16 horrible rounds of radiation and chemotherapy, and then dealing with the Whipple procedure, surgery.
Joe, you lose your dad, you lose your mom, you get a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. Even though I've known you for years because you and your wife Pam have been faithful to your Catholic practice, I have to believe that when you get a triple whammy like that, there's got to be room for anger, disappointment. God, what are you thinking? I'm one of the good guys. Why would I have to carry this particular cross or burden? Was there a period where you were just not terribly happy with God?
No, never hit that period. You know, the way I looked at it, why not me? You know, why couldn't it have been him or whatever? Hey, God has a plan. And before I was born, I know God had that plan and I had to fulfill it. I wish I didn't have to.
Right.
But you want to know something? It made me fulfill it. And as much as people think that this was like a horrible, horrible thing, which it is, it actually turned out to be a blessing.
Joe is also blessed to be in a wonderful marriage with his wife, Pam. She has 3 children through a previous marriage, and he has 3 boys. Joe, when you're a protective father, as you are, for both the girls and the boys, how do you broach this topic with your wife, who's the closest person to you? And your 3 biological sons are close as any father-son relationship I've ever seen. They adore you, they respect you, they love you. How do you tell them?
Well, yeah, growing up with my father, who I love and adore, and we had ups and our downs. My father was a tough guy. He's a New York City firefighter. Very, very, very proud of that. Very proud of his heritage, growing up in the Bronx, raising me up in Queens. He just had that. He had that pride, and when we talked about my father passing, I looked at a man that went through, I believe, more than I did. He suffered. He, with his heart, all the years of firefighting, he suffered with personal issues, demons. But he was a good, good man. And I always wanted to, I always said I wanted to be a quarter of the man my father was. If I was, I'd be happy. And then I would look at, hey, how would my father handle this? How would my father deal with this? Sometimes I didn't do what my father did, but in the back of my mind, and I always know that my father, always did the right thing, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted my boys, or my men, as I call them, my daughters. I wanted to let them know that, you got to be strong, because if you're strong, the family's going to be strong.
You have this incredible woman that you're married to named Pam. Now, like I didn't know you by the time you guys got married, but as you know, I have this annoying habit of asking every couple I married, tell me why this is the one. When you look back to why you fell in love with Pam and what the marriage has been like, what is so good about Pam that I know this day you are so grateful for her as a wife, but what's the heart of the relationship?
The heart of the relationship is family. We have, now I have 3 boys from my marriage, 3 girls from my, from Pam, but we're all one big happy family.
Yeah.
And I love them like they're my blood and water.
Yeah.
And Pam does the same. And, and we've gotten closer. This has given us closer. And let me tell you something. You're not going to meet a person kinder, more gentler, a person that she puts everything to the side. She puts her health to the side. She puts everything to the side. She puts everybody first. And she did this to me, which I know.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
And I feel that, I don't want her getting sick.
Yeah.
The most important thing in my world is I told her, you can't get sick because I need you to hold the family together.
Yeah, and she is, and she will. I often talk, as you know, Joe, about the difference between conditional love and unconditional love. My sense, watching you two together, is that you have found the miracle of someone who actually loves you unconditionally. By the way, so no one thinks we're painting a rosy picture, I have also been present when these two lovebirds have gone at it. So they're pretty typical and normal in the sense of they have their fights, their battles, but there's never a question about the love that undergirds, that holds up the marriage. They love each other unconditionally. But so how do you do that? How do you fight and still go on loving each other as you do? Because you do.
Oh, we absolutely do. And again, I take a little bit from my mom and my dad. My dad wasn't the easiest person in the world to grow up with. But, he loved my mother very much.
Yeah.
And my mother could be, a little tough. My father was definitely a little tough. But my father was going to make this marriage work. And with Pam, she has such a good heart that she stands up for what she believes in. Same thing. If somebody talks to her, about abortion, or talks to her about something about
that violates her values,
something right that she doesn't believe in.
She's all in.
She fights, and she'll fight like a bulldog.
Yeah.
She'll respect you, and she'll love you, and she won't hold anything different.
Yeah.
But, this is the way she is. And I used to say to myself, listen, my regrets 40-something years ago, getting divorced, which I paid the price.
Yeah. But you've moved on from
Pam,
that?
and I love Pam to death, and I'm so glad I found her.
Yeah. And that's mutual, Joe. For our listeners, Pam was a member of the RCIA. She became a Catholic convert. And every Sunday when you see Joe and Pam in church, they share the faith, they share the Eucharist, and they have an unusual habit that people have noticed and been encouraged by. They go to communion holding hands. Tell us how that started, Joe.
Well, I grew up in Flushing, Queens.
Right.
Okay, I was an altar boy, went to St. Anne's Elementary School. I went to Archbishop Roy High School, St. John's. And I always felt that I was going to be in Queens. I loved Queens. And first marriage didn't work out for whatever reason. But Pam was always Lutheran, but she brought up her children Catholic. And she always wanted to go back to the church. And I kept saying, not ready. I'm not ready. And then we went on our honeymoon where John F. Kennedy got married.
In Newport.
And we had a little bit of a revelation, which is another story, which I could tell you 1,000, but we had a revelation. And that next Sunday, I came to church, and that was probably back in 2009. 2000, and I was dealing a lot with my dad.
Right.
And, my father wasn't the easiest person with AIDS, and I had to make sure I had to take care of him. And working, the boys.
Yeah.
And so we went to church, and as soon as I came out of the church, you looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm fine." And you looked at Pam and you said, "You better take good care of him." Yeah. And ever since that day, we have not missed the Mass We've, if you went on vacation, we found a Catholic church in another state. We found another Catholic church in another country.
Right.
And
So your faith is bedrock. It's part and parcel of who you are.
it is who I am.
Yeah.
Because without my faith, I'm nobody.
Yeah.
You know,
Joe, when the time comes, whenever it comes,
yes,
you going to heaven?
I'm going. I think it might be a few stops on the way, but no, I know I'm going to heaven.
Good.
Like I said, you know, I've since July of 22nd, I've heard, all right, you got a year, you got 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know.
Right.
You're inoperable. You know, enjoy the last times you have on earth. And that wasn't me. You know, I wanted to work because I felt if I kept working, okay, it kept me moving. It kept my mind moving.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I had my one son, Peter, who was a police officer, and I had Joe, who was a correction officer, and my son, Anthony, and even my girls and my mostly my grandchildren, I tell them, all you have to do is one good deed a day.
Yeah.
And that one good deed could just be saying, hello, good morning, you know, can I help you with a package?
Right.
Can I do this? And he says, and that's going to make you a better person.
Yeah.
And people are going to look at you like that. And so, you know, that's one of the most important things in life.
Joe Falgiano is blessed, as we talked about, with this wonderful wife, Pam, who's been so devoted to him as caretaker. But he also has 3 remarkable sons, Anthony, Peter, and Joseph. And I don't think you would know this because this is your story, but because I visit so many people who are sick and families who have problems, so often the kids are not present. Your kids have been present here, Joe, through your illness constantly, taking care of their father, loving you, again, unconditionally. What did you do right in raising these boys that they turned out to be so devoted to their dad?
That has to go to their mother, Susan.
Okay.
Their mother has always been behind them. We've always done things together, made decisions. And Pam, on the other hand, has always been there.
Yes.
Now, all right, that's your mother, okay, and that's your dad. But, you know, if you ever need to talk, I'm here.
Yeah.
And so there was a relationship that grew. And
you proud of that?
They're like very good friends.
You proud of your sons?
I'm extremely proud of my sons.
Yeah, you should be.
And it's funny, I'm more proud of my sons now because I have a lot more chance to talk to them.
Yeah.
Now, just a couple of examples, like my dad, when he was passing away, and he blamed my wife for having her mother die because my father was very close to Pam's mom. Very, very close. They lived in Queens together. And when I told her that she went, we had to bring it to a nursing home for a broken hip, my father blamed her. So my Pam would write these little notes to my father when he was in the hospital, and my father would rip them. Make a long story short, I didn't have the heart to tell Pam that you couldn't do that. So just before my father passed in February, I'm working, and it's late at night, and I wound up getting into a hospital in Queens. And I said, Dad, you're going to come to us. You're coming to the, we're going to be going over to the to Massapequa Center. Oh, he goes, well, is Pam going to be there? I'm like, yeah. Because I haven't heard from her. I said, well, here's a card. And this card was from like about a month ago. He goes, oh, So he takes the card. He goes, "Oh, that's so nice." He puts it on his tray table. So I'm like, "Okay." So he was happy.
Let's talk legacy, Joe. When you are in heaven and your boys are talking about what you taught them, what you meant to them, what would you like them to remember most about you?
That I treated everybody fairly.
Mm-hmm.
I loved them equally,
Mm-hmm.
and that there was nothing that they could ask me that I wouldn't do for them.
Yeah. And they know that.
They know that. And, I just seen it, like they have schedules, like who come early,
Yeah.
who come in, who would just stay the whole night.
Yeah.
And, and the other thing is, which is embarrassing because I did it for my dad, they would clean me up.
Yeah.
Because I really can't get from the bed. I'm trying.
Yeah.
But
That's what love does, huh?
yeah.
That's what love does.
And, am I still fighting? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Every day I try to get up and do a little bit more.
Yeah.
And
That might be, you're touching on one of the hardest parts of life, isn't it? To surrender. That's even in scripture where Jesus says to St. Peter,
right,
someday you're going to have to let other people lead you. And you can't be always in charge. And when you're a strong dad, as you have been, it's got to be tough to say, I have to be dependent now on these sons of mine and my wife and let them do for me. And you're a very independent and strong guy. So you've come to that point of letting them do that, haven't you?
Yeah. I've seen such a maturity in them.
A growth, yeah.
And, and they're working together.
Yeah.
And the one thing I got to thank you too is that, my son Peter and Megan,
Mm-hmm.
they were supposed to get married the Larchmont in
Next year.
2025.
Yeah.
And that we were able to move up their funeral that Monday where they told me, all right, you only got a couple hours to live.
Yeah.
But you want to know something? I beat them. And I'm going to beat them again. And
the will to live is very strong in you.
yeah.
But also, it's accompanied, though, and this people need to know, by a faith that Joe has said a few times, if I go today, I'm okay. I've had a wonderful life and I'm going to heaven. You're amazing.
No, and it's funny. I always wanted to say, people say, oh, did you see any signs?
Mm-hmm.
Your mother, your father. About 3 weeks ago, we was sitting at the LIJ on the 8th floor, which is a beautiful private room. Because they knew my time was coming. But I was like, no, I got to get home. My one grandson, Lucas, has autism. And I wouldn't want him to be in that hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And you wanted to say goodbye.
I wanted it, and I wanted to be here. So Saturday morning, and Pam's holding my hand, and I just get a jolt, and I see 6 circles. Perfectly 6 circular yellow circles. Can't explain it. Didn't hurt my eyes. Pam's like, what?
What happened?
I says, I think I got something. And she's like, really? So we wrote out the time, and I drew out the circles. And she goes, is that it? She says, I don't know. And then during the week, I'd sit in the bed. Now, Pam and I would usually sleep together, and then it would be hard on her back. And she would come here, sit on this couch. And the back wall, there used to be a piano.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw my mother, it was almost like an arcade game where she walks back and then comes back across.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow. And my mother's wearing a dark colored, stuff that she used to wear.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day, it was where the banister was, coming down into the, into our basement
family,
here.
Right.
So I definitely believe
You saw
that.
Mom, but not Dad yet.
No, I know. But I know my dad's waiting for me.
Yeah.
I know my dad is going to have a lot to say. I got my aunts, my uncles.
Lots of people are that you'll have. While Joe has been convalescing since he got out of Long Island Jewish Hospital, he also has been visited continuously by family and friends, which is what we expect. But lots of these people are police officers, some retired, and they love you so deeply, Joe. I'm just wondering, when we look back over our lives, we all have things that we did right and some things that we regret. Public service, being a police officer, getting married, having children, any regrets in your life?
No regrets. The only thing is, I tell everybody, you treat people the way you want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And even though a lot of these people I haven't seen in a while,
Yeah.
it's like a band.
Yeah.
It's like a band of brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Whenever somebody's down and needed something, or a
Mm-hmm.
family crisis, you're always there for one another.
Yeah.
And, that's something I can never take away. And that was one of the greatest things about being a police officer.
Yes. Joe Falgiano has been our guest on Personally Speaking. We talk all the time in church about the importance of faith and family and service to others. And I'm here holding the hand of a man who has put all those beliefs or those ideals into practice. He's a devoted husband and father. He's a wonderful grandfather. He's a great in-law. He's also someone who beautifully has been devoted to his own parents and their caretaking. So he puts the faith into action as a public servant for 40 years altogether, taking care of making sure that we're safe and that we're well cared for in society. This is a beautiful, fighting, delightful soul. I have had the privilege of being his pastor here at Our Lady of Lourdes. I wanted you all to meet him and to hear him because I think he is probably one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met. A man of love, compassion, service, and dedication. I wish we could all take a page from Joe Falgiano's book and, as he says, treat one another as we wish to be treated and live a life of meaning. Joe Falgiano, thank you for being on Personally Speaking.
I love you.
I love you too. Thank you, little brother.
Thanks for being with us on Personally Speaking. If you need to reach me for any reason, you can do that at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. You probably listened to this program on the Catholic channel, 129. And you can do more than that. You can watch it as well on YouTube if you like by searching under Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante. Please share and let others know about Personally Speaking. I'm delighted to serve as host and executive producer, Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.